Hey guys, come on in, come on in. Welcome, 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 welcome. You know what time it is? It's Thursday night, which means it's time for some education. Come on in, come on in. We're going to wait a few minutes for everybody to come in. I'm obviously not Sarah Cooperman. My name is Jeff Howard. She is out and about somewhere in the United States, or maybe not, but she's asked me to fill in tonight. And when I found out what the topic was, I couldn't resist. I want to learn about this as much as you guys do. And I talked to my panel before we got on, and boy, do they know what they're talking about. Some more than others, but I won't kind of point fingers at anybody. Anyway, guys, come in, come in, come in, come in. We have about actually 293 people signed up for this webinar. So this is a topic that you guys really, really care about. So that's exciting. You know how it is. We're going to have about 40 to 50 people probably signed in, but you know it's recorded and you'll get an email accordingly so you can listen to it at your own pace as well. This is going to be all about knees. Bulletproof your knees, bulletproof your knees. Before we dive into the topic though, I would love for my panel to introduce themselves. And I'm going to actually start with my newlywed of newlyweds, Kelly Roberts, who's just a month in from getting married. Kelly, tell them who you are and how they can get a hold of you, please.
So I'm Kelly Roberts. Welcome, everyone. Good to have you with me. I am an ACE certified personal trainer, health coach, and group exercise instructor. I'm ACSM certified exercise physiologist, and I am also certified as a group exercise instructor with AFA and a ACE senior fitness specialist and FAI. Personal trainer and a few other things.
An author.
And I'm an author. Look, I'll do a shameless plug. There's my book, The Professional's Guide to Small Group Personal Training. You can get it on Amazon.
Love it.
And yeah, you'll find me on my website, kellyroberts.com. I'll put that in the chat later on. And excited to be here.
Perfect, perfect. Andrea, let them know who you are, please.
Hi, I'm Andrea Metcalf. I'm also a certified group fitness through ACE and NASM personal trainer. And then I did see a corrective exercise specialist, performance enhancement. I've written a Pilates Reformer 100-hour certification that goes online starting in January. So check out my website, andreametcalf.com, if you're interested in Pilates. I have a Pilates studio. I've been doing it for about 30 years. I've also had dozens of appearances on the Today Show. I wrote for Oprah.com, worked with Steve Harvey here in Chicago, Good Morning America. So television has been a big part of my career. Best-selling book about, like Kelly, lots of DVDs, and just excited. I've had both knees replaced, so I've had a lot of background in knees, pain, and I've experienced it, and I'm over it. So happy to be here, and always good to share what we know. But I'm primarily group fitness. I don't do as much personal training anymore. So for those people who are out there doing classes, we'll have a lot of good things to share with you.
Awesome. And last but definitely not least, Andrea, let them know who you are, please.
Thank you. My name is Andrew Gavigan. I'm based in Los Angeles. I've done personal training and small group and Group X for about 17 and a half years now. And most recently, I was the director of education at company called Active Solutions, where we have a big line of fitness equipment and storage and rigging. I recently moved to a part-time position as a content manager there and went back to just doing some private personal training and consulting because I am knee deep in school. I've been studying behavioral economics and human behavior and psychology for most of my tenure as a fitness professional, and I'm finally able to, and I hope to be able to share even more information to you and between all of us regarding human behavior as we move forward.
I love that. And my name is Jeff Howard. Hopefully I've met you along my fitness journey. I actually have a degree in kinesiology from the University of Texas, a minor in nutrition, and I was the Group X person for SCW, their certification, also the aquatic certification, the Pilates certification, and yoga certification. But enough about me. We're going to dive in. I want everybody to be aware that you're all muted right now just because that's kind of the way it has to roll. Cameras are off for no distractions. We have security. That's if Andrew gets out of control, we can boot him out. Participants, we got about 50 people in here, but what I care about is the chat button. If you haven't opened it yet, please open it and drag it to the side. I've had my panelists write in how you can get a hold of them. But also, this is for you guys. So if you have any questions that we're not maybe answering, I would love for you to type it in. Or if you agree with something as well, please type it in. I'd like to get your feedback. That's what makes it enjoyable for all of us, because we truly are here for you. But let's dive in. Bulletproof your knee. Knee pain and restricted mobility can make exercise challenging, problematic, or for some impossible, often jeopardizing clients' health and fitness goals. Join our panels of experts as they examine the structural and mechanical components of the knee, common injuries influencing joint dysfunction, and specific suggestions to restore function without the risk of re-injuring. Okay, so the first question is kind of obvious. How do you identify knee injuries or dysfunctions in a client? How do you identify knee injuries or dysfunction in a client? Kelly, let's start with you.
Well, knee injuries are pretty easy to identify because they usually have pain. Pain is a pretty good indication that there's something wrong. I know, I have a torn meniscus, and the first indication for me that there was something wrong was actually a Baker's cyst. I had pain in the back of my knee, and I couldn't fully flex my knee. And that was, my rheumatologist diagnosed the Baker's cyst, and I later got an MRI and did that whole thing. I think you have to be really careful of your scope of practice as a personal trainer. It's not for us to diagnose. We can identify movement problems, movement deficits, or movement excess, extraneous movement at the knee with a squat, doing a squat assessment to just look at how the knee is moving. But I think it's just super important that we stay within our scope of practice and not try and diagnose something. That's not for us to do. That's for a physical therapist to do, or a doctor. But I like to do a squat test or a single leg balance assessment just to look at balance, because balance, you're often on one leg, just gait alone. You're constantly on one or the other leg. So a single leg balance or a squat assessment. And if someone's squat assessment doesn't look good, I'll usually put their heels on, elevate their heels on, say, a 5-pound weight plate, just elevating the heels by, quarter inch, half an inch to an inch, to see if the depth of the squat improves with their heels elevated. And that will tell me a little bit about what's going on with the ankle, because I think you want to look at the ankle, the foot, and the hip more than the knee itself, because it's often a knee symptom of an ankle that's not moving efficiently, or a hip that's tight. And that will kind of give me an idea about, there's the obvious thing, if someone's very valgus, the knees are dropping in, or if there's just a lot of extraneous movement in the knee when they're doing a squat.
I love that. Andrew, how about you? How do you identify knee injuries or dysfunctions in your clients?
The squat assessment is definitely one of my favorite, mostly used tools anyway with my clients. I train a lot of general population, and just by chance, as I get older, so do my clients somehow. So I'm seeing plenty of knee issues. And to Kelly's point, I have a piece of plywood in my garage gym. That's where I train a lot of my clients. And I joke to my clients that it's the most expensive, most fancy tool that I have. It's literally that big, and it's about a half-inch thick. And if I have clients who drive too far forward over their knees, or over their toes rather, I'll put their toes on that little board. Or if they send their head back too far, I'll put their heels up on that board. And as long as there's no pain or discomfort, then I've simply found an imbalance that I can continue to work on, or at least continue to protect via using that board. And then I see that knee valgus a lot too. And one of the things I do when I see that, again, barring any severe pain, which we have to refer out, I usually just try to prime their glutes either unilaterally or simply with like a regular loop or some Pilates exercises. Sometimes it changes the whole dynamic of their squat immediately, and sometimes I'm working on it for 6 years, but whatever the case, the squat helps me to recognize that right away, even without any fancy overhead reaches or explaining anything to the client themselves.
I love that. I love that. And then Andrea, I think you have 3 things you like to have people do to
Yeah.
assess if they have a knee injury or dysfunction.
And I think just to reiterate again, if your client comes in with pain or swelling, that's where you have to kind of take a step back and say, you need to have someone else check this out, that's out of our scope. So it's the person that's coming in, I'm meeting them for the first time. I have, of course, the squat test, and I'm looking if their knees are dropping in. I'm also looking where they're lining up. So I don't initially tell them, point your toes forward, shoulder width apart. I'm just asking them to squat to see what their natural movement is. And if they are, for some reason, you say point your toes forward and shoulder width apart, and you want to see where their natural movement is, you can have them march in place, tell them to close their eyes and stop. Where their feet finish is where their natural pattern of tightness may be through those hips or through those ankles. And so you can get a good idea right away how they're moving. Another way I like to look at it too is just watch them walk, watch where the toe goes, see if there's any ankle movement, watch where their hip movement is. And then I guess the 4th way is a test that they use with the NCAAs or Division I sports and collegiate athletes, is the single leg touchdown. I'll do it because I did it before, because not everyone is on the same page. We call things so many different names, but it's when you stand in that single leg balance and then you reach down with the opposing hand to the floor and coming back up. And to see where this knee is dropping in or out, you'll see that when I do this just a little bit, there's going to be some movement through my knee that's wiggling. That's going to tell you what's going on with my hips. And Andrew said something that was really like, oh, that's a great way of explaining it. To prime the body or get the movement, we call it muscle activation, not the muscle activation techniques, but we're activating muscle to instill alignment. Once we do that, a lot of times the body just corrects itself once those muscles are turned on. So I just wanted to talk about that little prime movement that you talked about, the side steps, or activating the lower glute, the minimus and medius, to get the hip stabilization can give you a better squat and better movement throughout your workouts.
I love that. And I think communicating with a client, finding out what's going on with them. A lot of times somebody initially comes to me, I'm like, did you get new shoes? How old are your shoes? Where's your base of support coming from? Because I know even in this room, have you ever tried on a shoe that maybe is not the brand you normally use, and you do your class or your exercise and you feel it in your knee yourself? Because the base is not what your body is used to, whether you have inversion, eversion, or whatever happens. So I think questioning and finding out sometimes somebody has slipped and fallen. That's maybe taking them out of alignment. It's simple things like that. And then you can assess it that way as well. Somebody asked a great question. And the question was about the pigeon pose. And the reason I want to bring that up is because, to be honest with you guys, I've been in the industry, I'm 58 years old, and I've only had 1 knee injury, and it was only when I did pigeon pose, because of the hyperflexion of the knee. It just didn't work for me. So I would love to hear how you guys get around that or cue that, because I think I like to use a yoga block to lift yourself off the floor so you're not so down on the floor and give yourself a little bit more release. Andrea, how would you do it? I mean, Kelly, you answered it greatly as well, though. Andrea, you want to hit it?
Take pigeon, because for me, when I think about pigeon pose, I go in reverse. I have both knees replaced, so I have limited range of motion on how much I can get into that position. And when I'm unweighted within a stretch, I know I can always be in a safer position. When I'm putting body weight into something, when you used to try and drop your heel off the back of the stair to stretch, to me, those aren't always the most safe position. And can you still teach it in a yoga class? Yes, but you've got to talk it through, and you've got to look what your population is too. You got to see who's there and see if they're struggling.
I love that. How about you, Kelly?
I struggle with pigeon, and I like a supine modification for it. You lie on your back, you cross over,
Right. That's
or
what
even
I
a
do.
seated in chair, sitting in a chair for my elderly people. A seated position is usually a lot easier, but I prefer the supine version of it. And if you flex the ankle really purposefully, you can stabilize the joint a little more. So, but it definitely is a risky movement for the knees.
I love that. I love it. Andrew, you want to add anything, or are you good?
I can add a couple of just tangible adjustments. First of all, in some cases, flexing the knee more. So instead of my shin being across my chest, which is only going to happen if I fall off the roof, I can bend my knee, and that'll relieve some tension in some cases. And then I coincidentally have a client with a full hip replacement from a traumatic injury. So we put her up on a bench. She doesn't have any problem with her knee or ankle, but she has like severely limited, I guess would be external rotation in her hip. I put her up on a bench that's, average height for a bench press bench, and makes it a lot easier for her to hang her ankle off the end and slightly rotate it, and helps her to get in position. So that might be a resolution in some acute instances.
I love that. I love that.
Jeff,
What are
someone had said in there too, to flex the foot, which when we flex the foot, we take the gastroc off of the knee flexion part. So that will help a little bit, but we have to remember that when we're in pigeon, we're taking that hinge joint and we're rotating it. And so even if I flex the foot and take that cross of the gastroc out of it, I'm still impinging the knee. So it's, again, we have to think about it. Is it a great move for the class? Is it something that people really need to be doing? And I know in yoga, it's a move, but there's 999 other moves you can do as well. You can go into lizard, you can go into supine. And so think about that. You're bringing the best opportunity to that group when you go to teach. So if you understand anatomy and you understand positioning, you don't need to do that pose. That's just my take on it.
I agree.
I love that. Like I said, I mean, that's something I'm afraid to teach, just because if I felt it on my own body, it's just not working for me as well. But what are the most common knee issues and causes? What are the most common knee issues and the causes? Andrea.
Well, patellar tendonitis is probably one, but again, that's a diagnostic thing. So I think we have to, again, take that step back and look at general alignment and know that that's what our scope is. There's also IT band syndrome. There's also meniscus tears. There's also medial collateral or lateral collateral ligament tears. We've got that X, anterior cruciate, and the two side ligaments. And those are what the structures are that are holding our knee together from the tendon or from the ligament. But the tendons do a really good job of this. And for most people, they're not strong in the hamstring and glute complex, and they don't have stability in glute medius and glute minimus to stabilize the pelvis. And so they're getting knee pain from that. So, as far as diagnosing or talking about common injuries, typically pain in front of the knee is going to be from misalignment. Pain from the outsides of the knee, again, is that rotation from the hip or the ankle that's happening. So I try and teach really good alignment movement and watch for that in my class, whether I'm teaching yoga, whether I'm teaching Pilates, whether I'm teaching boot camp, even in spinning, you're going to see people, indoor cycling, we call it. You're going to see people who are out of alignment. And I think it's your job to coach them back into the right space.
I love that. I love that. What are the most common knee issues and causes you see, Kelly?
I see a lot of knee symptoms, not just knee causes. Unless there's been a trauma, it's often a symptom of something else. I had a client a few years ago who, when I was having her do I had her do an overhead squat because she was a power lifter. So I wanted to see her thoracic mobility, her shoulder mobility. And I had her do an overhead squat. And every time she squatted, her left foot just dove into pronation and externally rotated. And she'd had 3 knee surgeries on that side. But there was something else going on with her. And so I said, and she told me about the knee surgeries and that history, but she hadn't mentioned any other injuries. And so I said, what's going on with your left ankle? And she goes, oh, well, I broke it years ago. They put pins in it. They never took the pins out. I didn't do any physical therapy. So I was like, well, take off your shoe. I want to look at your foot. And she was like, oh, you don't want to see my foot? And I was like, oh, yeah, I do. I was like, I want to see your feet. I don't have a foot fetish, but I really wanted to see her foot. So she took off her shoes, and not only was her foot pronating, but the whole bone structure of her foot had changed, and it was splayed outwards or kind of inwards, where the whole bone structure had collapsed. So her ankle was not moving. Her ankle really was not moving. Her foot was moving and her knee were moving for her ankle. And she had a knee symptom and an ankle problem. So I like to look at the joints above and below the knee to see what's going on at the ankle. And in her case, the foot was also a problem because her ankle was really causing a lot of problems for her knee and her foot. So I really like to look at the joints above and below. And like Andrea mentioned about the hip strength and I call it the backyard, you know, the glutes, the hamstrings, because the hamstrings create so much stability and movement quality, good movement quality for the knee. And so do the glutes. And so I want to look at those, the function of those muscles, and see what's happening there to make sure that, to rule out, you know, hip weakness.
I love that. Andrew, what about you? What do you see the most common knee issues and causes?
I could speak to a couple of things that I see a lot. One of them is simply a lack of flexibility in knee flexion. Not necessarily pain or discomfort, but obviously we want to strengthen muscles around the joints just as much as we want to create mobility. I think that's just a symptom of people not kneeling or crouching or exercising, which moving through various ranges of motions ought to help protect that in general. But then I do also see knee valgus when the knees fall in, which is, as far as I understand, in my humble career compared to my colleagues here, is a matter of some weakness in the glutes. So again, we're looking above and below the joint to fix some flexibility and strength imbalances. In my experience, first of all, I have a major injury to my right ankle, so it doesn't move much. It doesn't, dorsiflex at all past 90 degrees. So I take a lot of tension in my knee when I'm hiking or I'm hiking uphill. My heel doesn't touch the ground. Thankfully, I haven't developed any major injuries yet. I also have a client, though, who suffered meningitis years ago and then had what was called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is essentially a paralysis of her entire body with some long-term effects to her, if I can remember correctly, her left side. So she has, correct me with my terminology, eversion of her ankle. So we spend time simply doing, we use an AirX pad to try to get her to engage her foot and all of her toes to prevent collapse into her knee, which I assume puts undue tension on the ligaments of her inner knee and her anterior knee. So those types of problems that I see a lot, I simply try to address, given again that there's no injury or pain, by strengthening all the muscles around it and the joints above and below, because the knee bone is connected to the ass bone apparently in many ways.
I love that. We've got a lot of questions regarding arthritis and osteoarthritis. Kevin asked, what about just basic osteoarthritis, wear and tear? I know there are many contributing factors, but this has to be super common to our clients. How can we help without being too aggressive? And it kind of goes with the one across that about arthritis in the knee, which I believe, Andrea, is what you had as well, right? Or you had just lots of ligaments or the cushion in there?
No, well, I had torn ACL and then I had it repaired, but I had a lot of osteoarthritis. The bone was on bone. I'll see if I can find the picture quickly so you guys can see how bad knees can look. But the key here is that we have to remember that when the muscles are strong surrounding the joint, there's more joint space. And so what muscles cross the knee? Gastroc, hamstrings. Those are your first two key ones on the backside, because we walk forward, that quad is going to be pretty strong. We also have to think about the balance of how much that gastroc is working, so that you have a good ankle movement between tib anterior. So some of my favorite exercises for people with knee pain are walking on your heels. Walk on your heels, get that foot flex that helps you open the ankle, and then side walks to as we say, prime the hips. So heel walks and side walks are going to prime my hips, so my knee is going to be at less risk of being out of alignment. So the more alignment that I have, the more strength that I have, the more the joint will be pulled apart.
How about you, Kelly? How do you address like the thing with arthritis and osteoarthritis and all that good stuff? How do you, I mean, because we have masses that come to us and they are going to have these issues.
Actually, I'd have to agree with Andrea. Good posterior chain strength and good mobility in the ankle and hip are going to be key for that. If someone can't squat, if there's just too much knee pain to squat or lunge, because my go-tos are lunging and squatting and deadlifting, then a terminal knee extension move can get the front and get the quad. So seated, leg straights, and lifting and lowering the leg like that with the foot flexed. And then bridging is good. Bridging is one of my go-tos. I love a bridge or hip thrusts to get the glutes without the knees being so implicated. Because when I'm super arthritic and I've got a knee injury, but it doesn't cause me any trouble as long as I stay strong and flexible. I have no pain as long as I'm strong and flexible. But I had a surgery last year and didn't exercise I wasn't allowed to exercise for 8 weeks. And my knee got so painful. It was sharp. It was like someone sticking a knife randomly through my knee with certain movements, and I couldn't predict when it was. It was super painful. And in the moment I started riding my bike and indoor cycling and strengthening my hips, it went away. And it stays away as long as I stay strong. Strength is really key for me.
And I want to add aqua fitness, guys. Don't forget about the pool. Get them in the pool, because there's something about the buoyancy of the water that takes the stress out of it, out of the joints. They're more buoyant. And the aquatic population is really where we find a lot of people with arthritis going. And osteoarthritis, my mom, prime example, both hips, totally gone from that. And she can't get off the toilet if she doesn't take her water classes. Because it's kind of what Kelly's saying. It's one of those things that it's a painful movement. It's painful to move it. But if you don't move it, then it's going to become worse almost. And that's the hardest thing we do. In fact, Andrew, because of the mental thing, how do you get people to get through that? Because you're asking them to do something that's uncomfortable.
Yeah, lots of good questions. That's tough. It's hard to get people to do things that are uncomfortable, which is probably why most of the people we know don't exercise at all. Expectations are a big thing. And I don't mean having people expect to feel discomfort when they work out with you. But let's say someone like myself comes to you. I played football for half of my life and now I'm older and I have an identity crisis based on my knee pain. Setting expectations of what you're going to accomplish today or over your short-term program is important. You don't want to cut somebody short and treat them like a child or an invalid, but you do want to set good, solid expectations, use your SMART goals, and it helps people to stick with you and actually notice whatever positive outcomes they have. I think it's also important to remember that their acute feelings of success during each workout is important. I don't necessarily have to have somebody squat or flex a lot at the knee to give them a good lower body workout or that feeling that they might want at the end of the day. So if it does hurt them, and you don't know that you necessarily need them to move through that joint for whatever their exercise prescription is, you can stick with your RDLs, your hip hinges, your Romanian deadlifts, or your hip extensions or bridges on the mat, or your light step ups if that's something that works. I can't speak as well to what exercises should be done for arthritic knees. as my colleagues can, but whatever the case may be, remember that acute feelings of success are important, and success isn't always based on the actual outcome of something. It can be based on the expectation of the outcome for something. So utilize your skills wisely in that instance.
I love that. And actually, we're going right into a question is, what are some exercise recommendations for various knee conditions? What are some exercise recommendations for some various knee conditions? Andrea?
Well, I think we've already talked a little bit about those primer movements. Andrew, I'm going to steal that. That is going to be my new thing. Prime the body before you start moving. You know, we used to always talk about warm up and big muscle movements. I kind of like your idea of, get them in that circle band and do sidewalks. Make sure the toes are pointing forward or slightly inward to activate that. Clamshells, if they can't walk, get them into a clamshell. It could be seated, it could be on their side. Sometimes being on a table, if they can't get down to the floor, is a nice way to start activating that hip complex to get those thighs so they can be in alignment. Anytime you have this wobbling in or out, we've got to figure out what's happening. A lot of times it's not that inner thigh muscles, it's the outer thigh muscles that we need to be working, those side leg lifts. Someone was asking about, what do you do for knee rehab during knee replacement? And Kelly brought it up. Those straight leg lifts laying down is the majority of where I spent my first 4 days, intermittent with walking, and being able to do that. As they progress, one of my favorite things for knee exercise that always kept me out of pain was starting on a bar stool on a high seat and doing a stand up there. So it's kind of like if I was on as high as my chair is, the side of my chair, just working on standing up from here, this last 20 degrees of standing up. And as I got better, I would lift one leg and be able to do that single leg stand up. So it's the last 20 degrees of extension that also helps the knee. It helps stabilize where that knee's at. Of course, we've got all the hamstring work. We've got bridging, which we've all talked about this, but I don't think enough people really realize how important flat butt syndrome is on the rise. It's where people aren't using their glutes and they're not using their hamstrings and they're not pushing off their foot because the feet are turning out. The knee's already dropping in, so they're not bending that big toe. If the big toe doesn't bend, you can't get into hip extension through your regular walk. So just getting them to walk with bending their big toe. I think someone had said, my client can't extend her knee straight because she's so obese. We'll get her to walk slowly, pushing through her big toe, and that'll help her get into that extension. But those are just a couple of things that I really think are the most important for me and when I went through so many knee issues throughout my life.
How about you, Kelly? What about you? What are some of the exercise recommendations for various knee conditions you like?
Well, I think Andrea and I are very much on the same train of thought because I love that terminal knee extension. I love bridging, RDL, I love my deadlifts, but, and then that last, sit to stand squats are very helpful from a higher chair. But as you mentioned, the water, I think the water is a great place to be. If land exercise doesn't work for you, get in the pool. I rehabbed my total shoulder replacement. I know it's a shoulder, we're talking about knees, but the water was the best place for me. The hydrostatic pressure, the 360 degrees of resistance, light resistance, and no gravity. Gravity is our greatest friend and our greatest foe when it comes to arthritis, because it's pushing down on us and we're compressing, and getting in the water is a great place to be when you're arthritic, especially warm water. I love the therapy pool. Get into the warm water, not the cold water, because that warm water really kind of helps the joint relax and you get better range of motion, and it keeps the body warm and
Love that. How about you, Adam? Do you want to add anything, or are you good?
I don't. That's pretty solid. And I don't know if I'm skipping ahead here, but one of the best things most of us can do for performance athletes. And then one of the best things a lot of us can do for our joints is to maintain healthy weight. So outside of exercises, obviously, that's the biggest battle we have with ourselves and our families and our clients is maintaining healthy weights. But they really do put undue stress on a lot of joints. Even someone like myself, I realize you can only see this much, but I'm 220 and I have a low body fat, but it's simply just being larger has a large impact on our joints. So keep that in mind and offer that to your clients when it's appropriate to talk to them about that. But that's one way you're going to keep ankles, knees, hips, and backs healthier.
That's great. We've got 3 questions that I would love to address. One is, what about subluxation of the knee? Andrea, do you know anything? What do you suggest about that? Do you know anything about that? I don't know anything.
Andrea is going to have good answers for that.
Well, isn't subluxation, let me just make sure I understand this. Is that different than hyperextension? I'm not sure what sublux of the knee is, because if it's locked in here, right, that I have no place to go. And so that means that I have no movement. So I'm not quite sure I've dealt with that or have any kind of experience to offer on that. My initial thought is get in the pool, warm water, let the body unweight itself. But I can't imagine that person walks then if they have subluxation. So I'm not sure.
Actually,
When your kneecap's off to that's your kneecap subluxed. Actually, I have a client who's a cancer patient that has a titanium. Part of his femur was removed, but he still has the tibia and part of the fibula. And so when he came out of surgery, the kneecap was inside off to the side. And for the first 3 months in physical therapy before he came to me for regular training, so I'm looking at him, I'm like, your kneecap is in the wrong place. I don't know how they've been doing this, but I think we need to go right back to the surgeon to talk about this. But what they ended up doing is massage and gentle movement of when the knee is completely relaxed, of moving that knee slowly every single day. And so once we got the kneecap into place, then that was okay for me to take back him as a client. But when it was subluxed and off to the side, there was nothing that I wanted to do with him. I sent him back to therapy. So, but that's what he told me they did for him. That's just not something I have somebody in class with.
And then I kind of want to go back to what Kelly had said at the very beginning. Remember the realm of where we're at and what we are. You're not a physical therapist, that's out of your realm, I feel. So always remember your realm. Some of these questions are so intricate that it's not for the general population, I feel. So, and then I want to hit the next one, if that's okay with you guys. Several clients that are obese, because we all have this, and they cannot get on the floor and have knee issues. What are some land exercises you can suggest to help with that?
I have some suggestions.
Andrew, go. Yeah, great.
Yeah, sure. So of course it's dependent again on what they can do with it, but 2 big suggestions. I know most of us are familiar with suspension straps or suspension training. That can go a long way. You can obviously make exercises harder by doing push-ups on it, but it also provides a fantastic outlet, a fantastic tool for people who might not be able to do full squats on their legs alone. So if that helps, I recommend that. I use suspension body weight tools all the time. And then we talked about using the mini loop and doing lateral stepping. You can use heavy or light mini loops, the little rubber bands that go around your knees, and you can use them at your knees or all the way down at the ankles to create, in some cases, even more torque in a good way, or rather more resistance, and do lateral steps. It keeps the impact low. It often keeps the flexion and extension in the knee pretty nominal, or at least short ranges of motion. And it really builds up glute strength and heart rate. Oh,
sorry. Instagram popped open.
So those are great exercises. If your question is, in fact, how do I train their legs and glutes even though they can't get on the floor? That's a good way to keep impact low and also give them that sense of accomplishment, because they're really going to feel those exercises.
How about you, Kelly? How about you? When you
A weight, a very sturdy massage table can very much help, because then you can do those clamshells, terminal knee extensions, bridging, and those kinds of open chain movements. I want to just briefly touch on the subluxation, because I actually, I wasn't quite clear what subluxation was, but I had a client who had, his kneecaps were off to the side, and it was actually a hip problem. And he could squat as long as he stayed in external rotation.
That would
So
make sense. Yeah.
he had to, his kneecaps were way off to the side. I'd never seen anything like it. But he could squat and deadlift as long as he was in external rotation. So, yeah. But
For an external rotation, then and the knees off to the side, then it's in the right space for where
Right.
it's
yeah,
it's alignment.
Yeah.
Aligned. It's aligned.
yeah, he was aligned in external rotation. So it was kind of, it was intuitive. It was intuitive, and a simple solution.
Kelly, did that fix anything, or did it simply prevent more injury or pain or discomfort?
He could keep his glutes strong, and squatting is part of how we move in
Yeah.
daily life. So I had to find a way for him to get on and off a toilet, pick something off the floor. And he was intuitively doing it. It was just a question of letting him know that that was the correct way to move, assuring him that he was doing it right, because that's how he was doing it. So we just, if he was in group exercise instructors and the instructor tried to correct him by moving him into a parallel stance, for him to know, because he was doing group exercise. That's how I met him. For him to know that he was correct in staying in that external rotation.
And he needs to tell the instructor it's okay for me to be doing it this
Yeah.
way.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so that was the solution.
I love that.
I have one more, Jeff. Someone had talked about obesity.
Right.
The treadmill is a really good tool, the ones with the long arms, to be able to unweight yourself. And don't forget the power of going very slow and backwards, especially for your obese knee issue people. Walking backwards at 0.2 or 0.4 miles per hour, not 4.0, but 0.2, 0.4 backwards, and having them hold onto the railing is a really good way to get them to start to open that back chain and unweight themselves as well.
I
You
love
can't get them
that.
in the pool, because the pool is the first place.
I love that. And when I have taught classes that were based on that population, I would use a step with maybe 5 risers, and then they would sit on it to do work. And then when they laid back, they were in a safe position to be able to bring themselves back up. So I taught it as if it was a regular class, but I just modified where I had them with the knee flexion and everything else. And I think you guys, as teachers, it's our job to let people know that the knee is not a shock absorber. We do a lot of plyometrics, and what's happening, I think, with the younger population with knee injuries is we're not having them sink into it, and it's our job to explain what the knee actually does. The ankle does more mobility than the knee, and it's just us educating. We are actually having 2 minutes left of this awesome, your questions have been amazing. Does anybody want to address how we do cue, though, like doing jump squats and all these beautiful plyometrics that are maybe hurting some of our populations because they're not quite understanding how do we cue that correctly, Kelly?
I like to talk about the legs being like springs that, you compress, you flex ankle, knee, hip, you absorb through your muscles rather than through your joints. And I see often people land with really rigid mechanics, and you want to just let the legs compress and absorb that impact. And also it should be quiet. If I can hear you landing, then, you're not absorbing the shock of the landing. You're not absorbing the impact.
Oh my God, I'm using that. I don't want to hear anything. That's awesome. What about you, Andrea?
I say toe ball heel, sink into it and think that you're in the sand. Because when you're in sand, you always kind of have good foot mechanics. I see people on the Pilates on jump board and the machine's moving across the room because they don't have the mechanics to slow and use that ankle joint. The knees and hips will follow if you follow that very soft. But I always talk the one too. I can hear you jumping. Stop it. I love that, Kelly. That's one of
I
mine.
love that. Andrew, you're going to be my last answer for tonight. We're running out of time.
Priming's the key word. Sometimes you have to do with your client for an eternity. Sometimes they'll be able to neuromuscularly engage after a few sessions. If all else fails, get yourself a late 80s original Thigh Master and put it to some work.
I love it. All right, guys, I'm going to have my panel put in how you can get a hold of them. I don't know about you guys at home, but I was blown away by their knowledge and their passion. I mean, I don't know if you felt the passion as much as I did. They care about you guys and care about the knees. This has been recorded. Make sure that you look for it when it comes out. Let us know what topics you want to hear about too. Please email SCW. They're very excited. My panelists, I thank you for sticking with my dumb questions and listening to me and answering my questions. You guys at home, take care of the people with their knees. My panelists, take care of your knees. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you, guys. Appreciate you.